here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the singer, songwriter and author. It is the one and only J Simpson, who I spoke to very recently to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. Wrote a fantastic book a few years ago called Early 70s Radio, The American Format Revolution, and also has had a prolific solo career as well. I will put various links in the notes below, but this is the interview. So after several minutes of interest but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Kim, it's over to you.
Well, my big musical, so I was born in 1969, but I remember being very aware of the songs on the radio. 1974. So 1974 was a big year for me as a 5-year-old, splashing around in a wading pool in, suburban lawn. And my dad's washing the car, and there's the radio. And in those days, in America, the songs that were on the radio were Rock the Boat by Hughes Corporation. I don't know if that was a hit in the UK.
Oh, yes, it was massive.
Yeah, big hit. And of course, Waterloo was on the radio all the time. And Billy, Don't Be a Hero. Was that a hit in the UK?
Massive, yeah. So there you go. And all those ones like, what's that, Dr. Hook, Sylvia, and If You're in Love with a Beautiful Woman, You've Got to Watch Your Friends. I don't know. It all merges that period.
Yeah. And of course, Listen to What the Man Said, which was, and so many more. And it's funny because those songs to me are very much like, Proust's little cookie that he eats, and the memory, floods in. I hear those little songs from 1974, and it just takes me so vividly into the starting point of my musical awareness. But it went before that. When I was a really little kid, I remember I just was always hearing what my dad was playing, and I remember he had a Rare Earth album. That might be one of my very first memories, is opening that Rare Earth album. And they were popular, weren't they, in the UK? I just want to celebrate. And they were a Caucasian Motown band.
They might have been.
Earth.
I'll check that out. I can't quite remember that.
Their songs were all over the radio in those days, but they might not have crossed the ocean.
Did you get those quirky songs like? There was one deck of cards about a story about some soldier having his deck of cards in the church, and then, he explained what they all meant. And there was another one with a mother talking to her child, no charge, when he wants pocket money. those really odd songs that were on top of the pops and in the top 20. That you were talking about the floodgate flow, because it wasn't just all pop; it was Telly Savalas.
Those songs for you, because that was a Wink Martindale song from the early '60s.
Which one was that?
Deck of Cards. But
right.
Tyler had recorded that in the 50s. And it's one of those songs that goes the story about the soldier with the deck of cards goes all the way back centuries about this card means, and whether it's religious or something else. It could be a military story. This is the heart of our regiment. And it's an old story, but it became a recurring theme in the 50s, 60s.
Yes, and it sort of appeared. No charge.
No charge too. That was one of those songs. There was all these funny, gushy family songs that were popping up in the early 70s. That was strange because the early 70s was a time. This was something I write about in my book. How the early 70s was a time of redefinition of what family meant. The whole concept of nuclear family was being twisted around and sort of monkeyed with in the culture, but we were having all these shows on TV about these enormous families. We're watching the Osmonds make their hits. We're watching the Jackson 5. We're watching the Waltons on TV. We're watching... Yes. But then some of these big families are broken families, which is unusual for the time. But there's a lot of these songs about kids, just very sentimental songs that we didn't see the likes of after that era. Like
I suppose Jimmy Osmond sort of did appear in 74, didn't he? Did he?
He had that enormous hit in the UK that was not such a big hit here.
Oh, thanks.
Long-haired lover from Liverpool was embraced.
It was like measles. It was like, it was like chickenpox.
Oh, it's a terrible record. And then if when you turn it over, the B-side is a song called Mother of Mine, it's unlistenable. And it's one of those what I call a penance flip. The A side is a Randy, he's being this little Lothario, but on the B side he's singing to his mother, saying how much he loves her, and please forgive me for that A side, that the things I was saying. And you see that you see that on a lot of records. And I should write something about that. It seems like one of the things I want to do after having done this book is I want to write something. I want to write about songs. That's what I'm really desperate to do, because that's what I think about all the time. I'm still thinking about the songs of the early 70s that are kind of not known and
Well,
need to.
we have an author in this country called Will Hodgkinson, which I now look across, and I sort of from memory, he said the 70s in the UK started with a song called I think Grandad, and
Mhm.
then finished with Grandma, and it was like bookend. I'm not quite sure if that's exactly right, but I do remember those songs, a bit like those, you can't not remember those songs, like the Winifred School Choir doing,
So
you know,
popular in England, which is peculiar. Is that Grandad song? I've seen that song on Top of the Pops,
oh,
and
because the guy who sung it was Clive Dunn, who was in Dad's Army, which was one of those classic TV
ah,
shows.
okay.
So
Well,
yes, these
there was
quirky kind of novelty records always got in there, as well
there
as,
was
some
another
classic.
Mother song by a young singer named Neil. It was a monster hit, and it was another Mother song. Neil Harris? No, Neil. Let me see if I don't know. I'm not gonna
No,
be while we're talking.
we'll have to do some research. So yes, so your 74 was your big year for the
Oh yeah,
music scene.
that was
That
my
was
big year, and it didn't, well, like with a lot of kids, it didn't go away. I got my first transistor radio of my own. I was always listening to other people's radios until I was about 9 or 10. And then that summer of 79 was another big, big one because I had my first transistor. Every song that was a hit in the summer of 79 is in my DNA.
right.
And,
So what was it? What was the hits of 79 in America at this stage?
well, Van Halen's Dance the Night Away,
Right.
Cheap Trick's I Want You to Want Me, that live version.
That Budokan.
Many disco songs, Donna Summer's Bad Girls and Hot Stuff. The Kink, or not the Kinks, the Knack with My Sharona,
Right.
and Ricky Lee Jones, Chucky's in Love.
Oh my God, Chucky
The Doobie,
Wise.
yeah, the Doobie Brothers. They put out that Minute by Minute album in '78, but those records were all over the radio by the summer of '79.
Which British bands were sort of, because at the moment there's a lack of British bands in there.
Were two that spring to mind that really that I heard on the radio when I was a kid, but were not that are not remembered in American radio or in American, and that's Bram Tchaikovsky. There was a song called "Girl of My Dreams," which was a great power pop song. He was with the Motors,
Right.
but he that was a great song. And what for whatever reason, I grew up in Salt Lake City, and for whatever reason, the local market really latched onto that song and played it a lot. And the other record I remember, British group, that was a hit over here that I don't know if it was a hit over there, was The Records, Starry Eyes.
Right. God,
And
no.
that seemed to have an American, their poolside and their managers, or no, their manager is poolside, and they're trying to get things going. And the song sounds like it's a romantic kind of song, but it's actually them taking a piss, their manager who's just who's out schmoozing uselessly while they're actually schmoozing pointfully.
Yes.
So the
Well,
song
that's
is not a romantic song. It's about you just go off and with your starry eyes being a silly manager, and we're gonna do the work. And it's such a funny thing to realize. So I do a blog called the Song ID blog, and I'm trying
right.
to. It's been lying dormant for a bit because it needs to become a habit. But I love to do it, and that's what I want to do. Like my whole life is I want to write about these songs, and that's one of them I think I've written about on the blog. I think I wrote about Starry Eyes.
Yeah, because from sort of trying to remember the top of the pops of that period, the top of the pops. I mean, we had the skids like Into the Valley. Then there was the
Which was
Grease.
nothing over in the US. That was nothing. We did
That was,
not hear that song.
right, that was, and then there was a reissue of the MASH theme song, actually, Suicide is Painless, that
Oh,
I seem
right,
to
right.
remember getting big. But then we had that slight, I mean, I was quite young and I came from the countryside. So anything like hip and groovy was not in my radar. I mean, yeah, I mean, punk. I was not in, my brothers weren't into punk. There was like the obsession with Queen at that stage. My other brother was into prog rock, so he was just, sort of, I suppose, mourning the loss of Genesis and Wishbone Ash and
Right.
Yes, because they sort of had their moment. By 76, 77, they were sort of gone. Punk had slightly, they weren't sort of, they'd sort of fallen out with each other by then, hadn't they? And Peter Gabriel was bringing his first albums out. And then we had people like Elvis Costello and Joe Jackson bringing Don't You Know It's Different for Girls.
Oh,
So songs like that started to appear
Joe
as well as
Jackson.
that disco.
Exactly, exactly. Joe Jackson was on the radio all the time in that summer of 79. Is She Really Going Out with Him was, but then that second album didn't make much noise, but that song was such a big hit. And also Nick Lowe's Cruel to Be Kind.
Right. Yes, that was a big one. And then, and in this country, I think there was quite a shift because then there was this kind of two-tone thing that started to happen with the beat and the specials and stiff records. And I think that was kind of popular because young kids started to like it. And then Madness appeared. And obviously, the playground was full of excited little boys running around with Madness. But I came from an area where it was quite heavy metal and sort of, music was really tribal. So to appear to enjoy two-tone, you were looked upon, your sexuality would have been questioned, it would have been, you'd have been called a perf basically. And,
There were definite boundaries in your.
and so it's status quo were the band. Then you had all the others, AC/DC, Motorhead, but the Quo were gods. You just didn't mess with
They
the Quo.
they're fascinating to me because they were nothing in the US.
No.
The only Quo song that made any noise on the radio was back in '67, Pictures of Matchstick Men.
Oh my
And
God, yes.
the rest of
Class.
their entire storied career is UK only, pretty much. And we call them status quo. You call them status quo properly. And
Right.
um,
Yes.
there were, I love looking at the charts. I love looking at the early '70s British charts and seeing songs like Down the Dust Pipe, which it sounds like a song that the US audience would have liked, but it just had too much of a British feel to it. And I think they seem to be a band that Spinal Tap looked upon for a
Right. For
sketch
inspiration.
sketch trajectory.
And you got to remember, my first single was Bowie. The second was Rod Stewart's Sailing, which I thought was just a masterpiece. The
Yeah.
third one was Blondie's Denis Denis. It was just,
Yeah.
and so Blondie appearing was massive, and she had parallel lines in Eat to the Beat, and then we had
Oh,
all those, Martha and the Muffins and Echo Beach and all those, really
yeah.
brilliant hit wonder type
Right. That's a
bands.
Canadian band, Martha and the Muffins. Blondie
Yes.
was also a big part of I mean, I could make a whole playlist of all the songs that were on the radio at that time and be very happy because Blondie one way or another, you know, was on the radio all the time in that storied summer of mine.
But then,
And
sort of politically, the 80s, Thatcher gets in 79. Then we have the Falkland War, we had the miners' strike, there's Greenham Common. We're really thinking it's all over. You have Reagan, but Reaganomics, which, is obviously didn't quite work out as he had planned. But, there was a big, there was also, you were exporting Dallas to us and, J.R. Ewing. What was your then, so the 80s then, you were sort of getting into your teen period. By then, there'd been the new romantic stuff I wasn't into. The Smiths came along, they were my band. The indie period of the 80s was everything. So what was your 80s like? I know you're 5 years younger.
yeah, well, my '80s kicked in 1982, and one of the great things about the radio market I grew up in is there were little stations that tried to emulate Los Angeles's K-Rock, KROQ, and they were very, very alternative and very, very up to date, and they were playing records by Bill Nelson.
Right.
the group we called Yaz, but you know as Yazoo, and yeah, New Order, and
Was
all
that
kinds.
was that Rodney? Was that Rodney Bingenheim?
Yeah, yeah, he was part of K-Rock, and that was kind of his heyday in the early '80s. And he had a show. I don't know if it was, I think it was a weekly show, but every Sunday everybody tuned in and he played all kinds of edgy stuff. But so these little stations were trying to emulate that, and it was working because I was hearing all kinds of stuff, psychedelic furs and just all kinds of records that I remember that are very much forgotten. One of the shows I do on the radio station in Austin it's an '80s show. It's called Be Kind Rewind, and we take turns. There's four of us, and we take turns every week. But that's an easy and fun show for me to do because I'm just reliving my teen years and playing these records I loved. I loved the early records of China Crisis and groups like there was a great single by a group called Blue Rondo.
Oh, yes.
Remember that? Slipping into daylight. They used to play that on the station, and I loved trying to recreate how I felt as a teenager when I do that show. And one thing about doing radio, as you probably know, is if you are swimming in this mad interest in music and culture, and it's insatiable and you're omnivorous, doing a radio show is a lovely thing because you sort of are able to do this act of completion and move on. And then the next week you could do another act of completion. And
Yes. And
it's
also, I think in a way, it's for me, I also was able to go back and get all the records that I missed the first time.
well, yeah,
And that, because obviously it just sort of came at you. And sometimes you couldn't even hear the record to know if you
yeah,
liked it or not because you just saw the name, you saw the review, but there was no way to access actually being able to listen to it. So you just let that one pass and then something else come along, you grab
yeah,
that one. But again, I mean, in the 80s, I was a bit of an angsty, uptight person, and so I was an indie kid. I didn't want to listen to new romantic stuff, Depeche Mode. I put that in another bracket. I didn't really want to hear. I look back and go, oh my God, I wished I hadn't done that. There's things I tell my younger self. It's like, just go to every gig you could. Don't worry about putting them, I listen to the Pet Shop Boys now and think, God, they're really great songs. And I
yeah, yeah.
completely, I
Exactly.
just,
I felt suspect being a Pet Shop Boys listener. I wouldn't admit it openly,
no,
but
I
they
wouldn't,
were they were
but
quite brilliant. But one thing I've been able to talk to some of the musicians, or I've been more observant, and it's still funny because a lot of those early '80s musicians are uncomfortable with being looped or being lumped in with some of the other bands. Like we weren't like them. And the thing is, early '80s music, which was just called this enormous blanket new wave, it was rolled out to us in just there were no distinctions, country rock like or cow punk like Rank and File would play side by side with Berlin, and we as teenagers just kind of let it all roll over us because it was the new music that wasn't being played anywhere else. But within that world they were very uncomfortable, clearly being side by side, like the Flesh Tones. They would hate to be associated in any way with the Human League. But if you listen to those stations, you would probably hear a Flesh Tone song right next to the Human League, and it wouldn't bother us
yes.
at all because it was all new, and it was tinged with the notion that it wasn't being played on any other station and it wasn't making the charts anywhere else. It was new
Yes.
music. It was exciting.
Well, we had John Peel, which was our sort of go-to person, and it was quite
Yeah,
hard going because it was just all this kind of weird and wonderful stuff. And when you listen to something new for the first time, it's quite hard work. But when you listen to 3 hours of someone's radio show, which is all basically all very unfamiliar first time, it's almost impossible. And I'd always record it on a trusty TDK D90 cassette
yeah,
and think, I have no idea what any of that last 90 minutes was. And I'd listen to it a few more times and it'd be like, oh yeah, I like this song. And oh yeah, that song is good. And that was it. But if you got two good songs in one of his shows, but they were great, they were songs that you'd listen to for the rest of your life. They weren't just like pop. Well, they were sometimes, but it was like there was something kind of magical. He seemed to curate this show. You know, he'd get the best reggae song, he'd get the best African song, he'd pick up early hip hop, you know, indie pop, you know. So it was like, I've got all this and I'll just give it to you in my 3 hour show. And you thought, oh, that's amazing. You know, it was so random, but you know, sometimes you just, you know, I think the first time I ever heard Frankie Knuckles, which was kind of Chicago house, it was on John Peel, and it was just like, God, that's a really great song. I'm not, you know, I don't, or Public Enemy, but it could be the Smiths, it could be the Bundu Boys. It was just quite lucky, really, in that front. I do think it was quite handy. So then, so how did MTV? So what was the MTV like? Did that sort of appear in your life during that early '80s?
Oh,
Then
definitely did. And MTV controversially had a program director who thought that soul was not the direction they wanted to go in. So, the first few years of MTV were very white, and it started to be clear to a lot of people, and David Bowie
I was going
made
to
a
say the David Bowie question where he just looks at the answer and goes, "That's interesting."
yeah. He pointed it out quite openly that there's a race problem on this station. And eventually it was, by the time Michael Jackson came around, it sort of got dealt with and reconfigured. But a lot of the new music from the UK was coming at me from MTV too.
Yes. Well, I was always confused when I came to America and thinking, why did A Flock of Seagulls? It was like, that was so popular. And it was like, oh, yeah, they didn't have many videos to play. And they had one from A Flock of Seagulls. It was on heavy rotation. So
And to
it,
us, they seem to have a lot of videos. They were on a lot, and that with their famous hairdo,
I ran.
and I listen to those records too, and they still remind me. They still make me feel. They still make me feel good because they remind me of being 13 or 14 years old. And when that song "I Ran" starts ding, ding, with the guitar, it sounds like a template or something. And I don't. It's funny because that probably is not how British ears hear it, but it just seemed like this. It was a redefinition of a guitar sound when those records came out. The Space Age Love Song and
Yes.
and Wishing was all over the radio in 1983. If I Had a Photograph of You, but they were not very popular in the UK, were they?
No. It
And
was, well, I think we kind of thought, oh my God, that's
over the
ridiculous.
top.
But then
And
recently, in the last 12 months, I did an interview with the guy who produced that first Flock of Seagulls album, which was, I think he was a guitarist in one of those space rock bands like Gong. And I think he just happened to get this gig. And it was quite funny because he said the vocalist just couldn't sing and he had to work for weeks to get it right. And managed to get something from it. But it was interesting how much the producer made the record, I think, on that front. It was like, yeah, I really did have to earn my keep on that one. But yes, and then he said, you'll listen to his other records when I wasn't working on them, and his voice is appalling. So yes, he took the credit. Yeah, so MTV was big.
yeah, it was big, and I have to, yeah. Um, so many of those. I remember seeing a video of a group called Nine Ways to Win. Do you remember them? Probably not.
No.
Very, very, just one album. Their singer had a very fey British voice, but little songs that would creep through in MTV would gain little followings among the US listeners. There would be little cliques of listeners who were all into this one song that appeared on MTV and nobody knew about, but we knew about it. And songs like that, like Nine Ways to Win, it was a song called Close to You that they would play occasionally. And every now and then they would play uh, any of the hits like by Nick Hayward in those early days that were
Right. My
they
God,
were
Nick.
they were maybe I don't know what the British thought, but to us they were these very stylish little jewels, little treasures from afar.
Yes, well, God, the riddle,
A
you
record,
know.
a record like Bananarama's. One of my very favorites is Bananarama's song called "Cheers." Then, which it just seems so European, so unlike anything we had here. And they're in their little hats and they're prancing around in France, And it's just it was the stuff of fantasy for teenagers like me who were not, I grew up in kind of a working class part of town, and there was just a lot of just kind of sludgy music that everyone was listening to. And if you were interested in music at all, hearing something from afar, which is what British new wave music sounded like to me, was very welcoming.
Yes. Well, it's interesting with Bananarama because, again, they were, I suppose I was a little bit older and I just looked at it as very disposable. But then I'd recently been
Oh, no,
listening
fun.
to them interviewing, and it was kind of it's like slightly made me want to like them more because they were just the kids. And in this country, we did have a huge amount of unemployment and lots, but we had a very good benefit system. So you could just sign on. And actually, it was almost like a career move, a non-career move. You would say,
Oh, well.
oh, what are you going to do when you get older? Oh, just sign on the dole and I'm not going to work, because getting a job was quite tricky. There was a huge amount of unemployment. But Bananarama were quite interesting because they were in London, all squatting and just scrounging and living, day to day. And Paul Cook from the Sex Pistols, he met them in a bar or club, and he said, "Well, you can come and kip in our rehearsal room," and that's where they started their life. Is on this,
Oh, so I
you know,
didn't know that. That explains why they would do that cheeky cover of No Feelings.
Right. Okay. I don't know that. But yeah, so they had this whole background of like, oh, you want to, because in a way I was one of those lefty,
Yeah.
anti people. So, anybody that looked like Duran Duran and they were on their yacht, I just went, oh, they're probably Tory boys. They're obviously going to be voting for Thatcher. I'm going to be over on this side. And Bananarama was like, well, they're probably that side. But now I realise that actually they were just living in that kind of, being on the dole. And a lot of people were like, oh my God, I'm going to be on top of the pops at the weekend. I better quickly sign off the dole, otherwise I'll get caught. And yeah, so Paul Cook put them up from the Sex Pistols, and they just lived in their rehearsal space. And then they started doing some music together, and then went, blimey, we've got something going here. So that was quite interesting. So
Well,
then,
they're another interesting group because their vocals were not remarkable at all. They were, basically no vibrato, just three almost disembodied voices when you heard them. Who are these? And then you saw them. Oh, it's them.
with the great hair. So how did then on the film front we had the Brat Pack movies, didn't we? That came along like The Breakfast Club and St. Elmo's Fire and Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Did you watch them and think that's an inspiration?
Oh, not really. I mean, I watched those, but I was by the time those movies came out, I was becoming a snooty teenager, and for some reason, the cinema world always arrived to me as an afterthought to what was being created in the music world. And I still feel that way. I still feel like movies run on the fumes of music. Music can be on its own and your imagination, but movies are lesser without the music. And this is a harangue of mine. And I'm gonna probably have more to say about it, but it's the question of usage that I think about all the time. And a lot of those movies, 16 Candles, for example, John Hughes movie. What would that have been without the music? Seeing that in the theater without all those songs. Altered Images Happy Birthday was in the soundtrack, and all these other great songs. Thompson Twins, The Key Romantic Moment is that great Thompson Twins song, If You Were Here.
Right.
That movie would not have resonated nearly as much without those songs. And all you had to do was to rent the VHS tape of it after, which did not have those songs licensed. So if you watched the VHS tape of 16 Candles after you saw it in the theater, you were just getting this mushy copy music that was
Right.
not the original soundtrack. And you watched the movie and it did not resonate the same way because it didn't have those songs. And so already that was a time in my life was where I was clicking into that idea that music is I was becoming a music chauvinist in those years. And I still am. I still watch movies, and I'm a pain in the ass with whoever's watching the movie with me because I start to complain. I was watching I was watching the movie Casino the other day, the Martin Scorsese
Oh,
movie,
yes.
and I just started making fun of it. Oh yeah, they're going to turn the corner. Here comes the song. We're turning the corner. We're turning the corner. And he's doing he's been watching Tarantino, and Scorsese is thinking, I need to get up to date and juice my movie with all of these songs, and some of them are going to be willy-nilly. You watch a Wes Anderson movie, and there's just the first few movies, it's just songs. It's all cool and they're carefully chosen, but it's just a bunch of songs. Who's going to make my movie cooler? The songs are cool by themselves, but the movie needs the songs. And I'm always a little snooty about cinema in relation to music. Music is
Yes.
special, more special. Music doesn't need the movies. Movies desperately needs the music.
Yes. Well, I was just thinking that scene in, is it Mean Streets with De Niro and
Hmm.
another one of those Scorsese films where I think it's a Rolling Stones track, which kind of when they're going into the bar and it's very red and suddenly, I think it was Jumping Jack Flash and
Or Gimme
it's,
Shelter or something.
oh,
Yeah.
yes, it was one, yeah, he always goes for those ones, doesn't he? And
Yeah.
it works a treat, really. And I think around that time, was it Robin Williams in Good Morning Vietnam? And that was when you would go and see a film and then go and buy the soundtrack.
Yeah.
The
Yeah. That was
80s
very
was,
much a thing it became a side industry to get the soundtrack of all the and they're basically what they call now jukebox films where, you watch the Jersey Boys, and it's a jukebox film where you're watching the music as well as the movie.
yes.
And
So So did hair metal sort of creep into your consciousness at this stage?
oh, it definitely did, because when I was a teenager, especially when I was in like what we call junior high, like 14 to 16 or 17, you had to be one thing or the other. You couldn't be both. You had to be a long-haired kid with an Iron Maiden t-shirt, or you had to be a Vans checkerboard wearing listener of new wave music, so to speak.
Right.
And one of my best friends was a metalhead, so I would listen to all the metal, and I was a secret metalhead. I wasn't a visual metalhead, but I was a secret metalhead, and I listened to all the music, knew it all, and didn't go to any of the concerts because I didn't have the right look, and it
So what
would have
was the
been
first gig you went to?
the first gig I ever went to was in 1982. I was 14 years old, and it was Bow Wow Wow. It
Fantastic,
was a
Annabella.
great show. It was a great show. And it
Oh,
was their only American tour, and I think it broke them. It was one of those situations where the band couldn't survive the pressures of oncoming fame, and they got back after that tour and fell apart. But
yes.
but what a great show for me to see. And a local ska band called 007 opened for them. They were also really good. But Bow Wow Wow was a revelation for a 14-year-old.
Well,
It's
they
just
did have an amazing band actually, because I did an interview with the bass player, and I can't
Did
remember
you
who the
really? A Bow Wow Wow?
yes.
Oh, he was remarkable. He was a great player.
Yeah, I mean they are
And
great. I mean they did a John Peel session as well too, and yeah, I mean it was kind of again they were one of those bands. I remember the singles "I Want Candy" and "Go Wild in the Country," and we're a little bit like, oh, at the age of 18, I felt a bit too old. But then I've listened to some of their other material, and it's like, they do a great song C86, don't they, or C66 and C90.
yeah,
It's a great, yeah, I would imagine because Annabella must have been all of 16 or 17 at the
yeah.
time.
But they looked like they had been through it. I mean, they were very. You can see bands on tour, and some of them are really chipper and really lively, and other ones look like, my God, we are still on the road. But they had that kind of majestic, bedraggled look to them. So they were they were like, they couldn't have the guitar on it. There was Matthew, what's his name? Matthew Ashman. he just had his shades on the whole night, and but they were just bringing it, and they're wonderful drummer doing the Burundi.
Yes.
I mean,
And he's still, I mean, I saw him on the, so because he's another one, but I've never managed to get the interview with him, but he's always like almost and then no. But he's rehearsing at the moment for something. But I saw him the
oh, is
other
that
day.
right? That's great news, because I hate to think about those bands and think that that was their moment, that they drifted away.
Yeah. I
Uh,
mean, to be that good, they must have
they were
rehearsed
so
like hell. And
they
then
were so good. Yeah, they were so good. That was such a great show for me to see as an independent teenager for the first experience. And so I've got all their records, and they're very much a touchstone for me. I can touch those records, and then stuff comes back to my memory, and I listen to them.
well, Lemmy from Motorhead always said, when it asked who, and David Bowie, they were both the same age, or they're born the same year anyway. And they always said, their influence was Little Richard, then it was Buddy Holly and, Elvis Presley and Eddie Cochran. And he said, you can't, you can only be 16 once, and those songs are going to be the ones that you've played and absolutely it got deep into the DNA. You can listen to her stuff later on, but it's never going to have the same emotional connection as that moment.
Yeah,
Yeah, you still feel quite emotionally a connection, a bit of a wobble or a bit of a something that happens when you hear some of those, or just think about them and think, oh yeah, God, that took me back to that
yeah,
period. It's like a portal, isn't it? Back to that period of, you know,
yeah. I saw Echo and the
innocence.
Bunnymen at that time too. Come to think of it, maybe the year after I saw Echo and the Bunnymen, and they also had that terribly. They always did anyway, didn't they? But they looked terribly bedraggled, like
Uh,
like they were so tired. Ian
yes,
Mc
I've
is like coughing, doing loud rattling coughs into the microphone while he's trying to sing. Anyway,
I would.
I've,
They would have looked beautifully. They would have looked beautifully haggard, I guess, wouldn't they?
oh, it was
Whereas now,
great.
so
It worked.
now they just look very old men looking haggard,
Yeah,
which isn't so sexy. But I think you can
yeah,
get away with it when you're young. So then, as we got to the late 80s, then did you at this point go to college, or did you at that point?
yeah. And I went. Yeah, I went. I was in Europe. I went to Eastern Europe for a while, and I listened to I went to Yugoslavia because I spent time in Yugoslavia just before it fell apart in the late 80s.
Right.
And I listened to a lot of very cool Yugoslav new wave music in the late 80s. And came back in 1990, and the country fell apart. And I remember having been in Europe for a while, and not even like in Western Europe. And I felt like so much had changed. I listened to, I was basically listening to all kinds of interesting Eastern European stuff. I came back, and I listened to Casey Kasem. Do you know Casey Kasem?
No.
So Casey Kasem is a voice radio personality, and he did the voice of Shaggy on Scooby Doo, for
Oh
example.
yes.
A lot of cartoon voices, but he did a show. He did the top 40 countdown every week, every Sunday. And so I remember coming back from there and listening to the top 40 countdown and seeing what's going on. What's going on with American music now? I've kind of been away, and so we got to number one, and he said, "Here is a songwriter from Oakland who came up with the idea for this song, da 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 da." And then he started playing it, and it was "You Can't Touch This" by MC Hammer. And I'm
Oh
thinking,
my.
what? It's a Rick James song, and he's just rapping over it, and you just completely introduced it as a songwriter who came up with an idea, and he's just rapping. So this was me trying to come to terms with the new musical terrain in the early 90s
Yes.
of sampling and rap music. And I was, of course, I couldn't handle it, and I was rebelling, but in time, and especially now, I understand, you know, I've calmed down and understood that it was a new construction. It was a new form of pop music. Relax. But I remember trying, so unable to come to terms with it. I felt like I was in a different reality. This song is first of all, it's number one, and you just talked about it like it was an original creation.
Yes, it would have been bad. Did grunge start to appear though? Because in your on your radar, because there was 4AD records and they had the Pixies and Throwing Muses, which we thought were amazing. And then,
Oh,
obviously Sub Pop appeared with John Peel playing the Sub Top 100, some tracks from that, and then Nirvana started to appear with Bleach before. And there was
mhm.
some sort of interesting stuff that Mudhuddy. We'd had Sonic Youth and the Buttholes and Husker Du. I mean, was any of that sort of on your radar?
It was on my radar because my younger brother was a drummer in the hardcore scene in Salt Lake City. So you know that movie SLC Punk.
Hmm.
That was the Salt Lake City I grew up in, and they did a pretty good job of it. Because the director was actually in Salt Lake during the early 80s. But by the early 90s, there was still a very robust underbelly, a hardcore underbelly, and there was a lot of straight edge. Straight edge was just an excuse for kids who grew up in repressed, Salt Lake City environments to behave badly, but doing it in the name of being straight.
Right.
It just, but anyway, it was a very rugged scene, and it was a very violent. I mean, you didn't want to be an adult. There were some of those clubs where adults basically weren't allowed. If you looked like an adult, you were gonna get you were gonna get clocked, or you were gonna get you wouldn't be allowed in.
Right. My God, that's
My
mean.
brother was in that scene, so a lot of that music, the stuff that was coming in from Seattle and elsewhere, was I was getting aware of because of him, and he was playing. All these bands were touring. I mean, I remember everybody came through. All of the groups with the most rugged credentials in that hardcore world tended to come through Salt Lake City because it was always on the way to LA or wherever, or San Francisco. And so yeah,
Had
it's
and
creeping in.
had
And
you started playing guitar at this stage?
I started working in about 1990. So there's a lot of ski resorts in Salt Lake, and I started just playing. I started getting gigs and playing at weddings and receptions, and I was the guy in the corner. And I still do those gigs all the time. It's still bread and butter for me to
Yes.
go to go. And every now and then someone will come up to me and say, "Boy, you're living the dream. It'd be great to just go to work and sit, play the guitar." And my thought is always, and in a way, I'm thinking yes, but in the other way, I'm thinking, well, yeah, someday you too can sit in a corner and fill the air with sounds while everybody eats. It's a dream come true, I tell you. But I started working as a guitarist, and I started playing clubs, and right, to this day, I'm doing lots of different. I play a lot of genre gigs. I play with an Irish band every week, and I play. I can do a lot of gigs where I'm singing all the songs in Greek, or all the songs in. I have an ability to remember lyrics in different languages, so I played a Swedish
Jesus.
party last. There was a midsummer Swedish party, and I put a band together, and I sang in Swedish the whole time. Um,
So how many nationalities can you do?
I know a lot of songs in a lot of different languages. I learned a whole bunch of songs in the Balkans, and I learned a whole bunch of songs in Greek, a lot of songs in Finnish, a lot of songs in Swedish. I know some Chinese songs, believe it or not.
God,
And
that's niche. That's
I was
very
the
niche.
sidekick, I was the sidekick for and that he's now passed away, but his name is Manuel Cowboy Donnelly. And in the late years of his life, I was kind of his sidekick, so I would play guitar with him, and he taught me a lot of songs in Spanish. And that's the radio show I do now. My main radio show that I do every Wednesday is called the International Folk Bazaar, and it's all what I call global roots music, and it's just that's the music I really love in my heart of hearts. And you can listen to that. You can stream it at koop.org.
Yes. Did you say you also had another um, radio show before that as
Yeah,
well.
yeah. So I'm part of a collective for an 80s show called Be Kind Rewind, which is currently on air right this very moment. Um, uh,
And is that linked to your website?
it should be on my website, which is kimjsimpson.us.
Yes.
At the beginning of this year, I added a J to my middle name just to help differentiate. There are enough other Kim Simpsons, so I thought maybe I'll start. I don't know, something,
Yeah.
something about that middle initial helped me refocus a little better. Anyway, kimjsimpson.us. And
Yes.
there is a link to on the top. There should be something about radio.
There was the radio show, and yes, okay. I'd love to have a listen to Be Kind Rewind, actually. That would be
Yeah,
quite interesting.
give that a listen. It's fun. It's different perspectives. You know, I have my perspective being a teenager in the 80s, and the girl who's doing it right at this very moment is my girlfriend, but she was born in 1982.
Right.
She has a revivalist's enthusiasm for the decade.
Does she play
And
Duran Duran?
she she would play Duran Duran, but uh the other one of the other hosts is much more into Duran Duran.
Actually, I don't mind Duran Duran. I sort of realized they were the kind of good. I put them and Spandau Ballet together a bit, and I realized that Duran, they kind of got a good heart, really.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
you know.
I wonder about that, with groups like I wonder about the days of the Beatles when all the girls liked the Beatles and how did the boyfriends behave? Because every now and then you'll meet somebody in who's in his 60s or 70s who really dislikes the Beatles. And I always assume he must have had a girlfriend who was really big on one of them, and
Yes.
and that's why he doesn't like the Beatles. That's the only way
Yes. Well,
I don't like the Beatles is some kind of sexual jealousy. But
I would imagine I could have.
I don't know
So
if that's
then, so then, as the '90s, then you brought out your first album though quite quickly, didn't you?
yeah, yeah, I did.
Destination on SCP Records.
Records, yeah, 1992, and that was the young me, the budding songwriter, and I put out another one in '96, and those are two albums that I'm still satisfied with. They are a good representation of what I was doing, and every now and then a video will pop up of me in a little club playing my guitar, and it's I always tried I always tried to have the guitar be my whole theory, and it still is I want the guitar to be as interesting as the vocals. And so I always wanted that's what I've always strove to do, and I'm still striving to do. It's kind of like what Richard Thompson and Bruce Cockburn do. And when you listen to them, if you see them live, they are not merely playing their guitars, but they are doing another level of expression. And that's what I was
Yes.
trying to do, and that's what I am still trying to accomplish when I show up at a club or something live. And at this stage in my life, I would sure like to do more live performance because a lot of troubles and various obligations have kind of gone away, and I'm at a point in my life where maybe I can wander a little bit.
Oh my God, the Troubadour. No, I do love a lot of Richard Thompson's material. It's just amazing.
I just saw his son Teddy, and I was just in Seattle, and I saw his son. And I was wondering watching him, how would that be? Because Teddy's got this wonderful voice, but he's clearly not playing the guitar is not his. He doesn't. That's not his thing. But I just thought, how would that be to always be compared to your father, who's
Yes.
basically peerless. When he plays a solo gig, he's basically I am the guy showing you how it's done. I am it. Here it's here's his son just doing his darndest, playing fine, but just he's just playing. He's merely playing.
Yes. Did the guitar, because you were saying the emphasis is always on the guitar, and you're quite intricate. Did that come quite quickly or easily to play in?
Well, it did come a little faster when I learned how to finger pick. When I was, when I was 16 or so, I'd been playing guitar for a long time, and a girlfriend's dad said, "Hey, play something." And and I played something, and I realized I really would like to play something a little better than that. And it might have been that very experience that made me get serious about learning finger picking. And I heard a local guitarist named Chris Proctor, who's pretty well regarded finger stylist, very Baroque almost.
Hmm.
I started going to lessons with him, and he gave me a big stack of records, and Bert Jansch and John Fahey and Dave Evans and Pierre Bensoussan, and just all these great players that just riches, and showed me a lot of basics, how to teach your thumb to think differently from the other four fingers. And
Right. So, God, that's amazing. I'm just trying to remember when you mentioned Bert, there was another guy who did the most amazing instrumental, which only goes on for about 2 minutes, but it's that kind of
like John Martin was another one.
oh God, Solid Air, I just think is an amazing
Early
song.
John Martin albums where the guitar, take out everything else and just listen to the guitar, and it's great, and all that stuff really connected. Those British players.
And did you listen to Nick Drake at this
Oh
stage?
yes, I did. There was a record store in my hometown that just had all kinds of odds and ends, all these cutouts. And there was a Nick Drake album that was released in the US. It was simply called Nick Drake. It was a yellow album with a gatefold that had about 9 songs taken from his first 2 albums. Nothing from Pink Moon, but just collection. And I bought that record, and it just, yeah, it was this unthinkable. This is the experience most anyone has listening to him. It's this, you float off in this pastoral neverland when you listen to those records of his. And he was another one. You listen to that guitar, take away all the vocals, take away all the orchestration, and the guitar is still carrying the day. Just such a one.
Yes.
So a lot of that British stuff was the root of that interest I had, and Davy Graham.
That's the one, Davy
Davy
Graham.
Graham. Yeah, these great players who just were redefining the guitar and making it an equal communicator with the lyrics. And
Yes.
and a lot of that was coming out of Britain. And that I had a whole just major phase in the late 80s, the late 80s. And I was drifting away from a lot of popular music. And in the late 80s, I discovered the incredible string band.
Right. So you were right there. There was another one called Bonnie Dobson who did a song. She wrote a song called Morning Dew that got very picked up by the
Oh, right,
Grateful
right.
Dead.
Morning Dew.
And
Being a
she
fan
cut
of the string band in the late 80s it felt so alienating because nobody where I grew up could possibly relate to that odd music. And maybe there were more people who were into it, but I felt very secretly safe with my.
yes,
I
I mean
I
yeah,
got to interview Joe Boyd last year. He came on my show, and we were talking about his new book, mostly world music stuff, but I treasured anything that he could say about his experiences recording either Nick Drake it's clear with someone like Joe Boyd that he's going to get real tired of the questions that people ask him over and over, and what was so and so like, or what was this like, but talking about everything else, it was just so wonderful when he would offer something we were talking about led to the recording session for Poor Boy. And
right.
so he was talking about finding the sax player and how that all came together. And yeah, that's just that's a magical place in history for me.
Well, yes, because he did so much work. He recorded the first Pink Floyd songs,
Right.
didn't he? And then yes, his work in the sort of 60s. And then, but
Yeah,
that frustration with Nick Drake was quite interesting, actually. And I always find that relation, the difference between Nick Drake and John Martin quite interesting because John Martin's such a masculine man's
yeah,
musician, and Nick Drake is completely, feminine, and women would love him. But they're very opposite, I found.
yeah, they are. Have you read the new book by Brian Coleman? There's a great new book just came out.
Oh,
And it's a very fun, quick read, and it's just Brian Coleman was kind of all over the place in New York City, and he was friends with John Martin for a while. And so there's a whole chapter where he's talking about hanging out with John and Beverly, and Nick Drake is just floating around in the background like a ghost, and how John Martin was kind of protective of him. And it's a wonderful snapshot. But the group's called the not the group, the book is called, oh, here it is. I have it right here. It's called,
No, cheesy queasy.
this is a great book. You should read it. It's a riotous read. It's so much fun, and you read it in a day.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's
Oh,
quite handy to know. Yeah. And did actually one band or artist that I came across recently, it was a Sandy Denny song that did you ever come across Sandy Denny and this amazing
Oh yeah.
song? God, there's a song that I just heard one night and it just changed my life. I mean, I just thought, I know Who Knows Where the Time Goes is pretty amazing, but there was just another one which I just thought, oh my God, it is just absolutely. But she does it with another band. It's called something like, oh Christ, I can't remember the band's name
Is it
actually.
Fathering Gay?
Yes, Jesus, thank God someone's on the
Fathering Gay.
case. And there was a song that she does there, which I think I don't know who it was for or about, but it was just one of those songs that Nothing More. If you hear a track called Nothing More, the lyrics, the guitar work in that, it's just, but God, once you hear it, it's just, you think
Yeah.
to be channeling such incredible, just lyric and sonicness is just, and the band are
She
incredible.
was the force of nature. Listening to her, I don't know if there's any, I mean, you listen to her voice and you think this is not an affected vocal at all. This is just a pure, it's a standard. I always hear her voice and think this is just a standard. This is what vocalists are trying to do when they sing. They're trying to just express clearly and wonderfully and fully what's in their head, and it feels like Sandy's always doing that.
Yes. So,
But
going back on your 90s period, obviously it's kind of a bit of a tricky period musically because suddenly it finishes, the 90s finishes with Woodstock 99, doesn't it? With the 3 days of hell on a sort of air base, and, the kids have just gone completely mental. But you're still sort of bringing out your albums at this point, which is like you did Midnight, didn't you? And How to Be Whole as well. Was
and,
it difficult to try and work out where you fitted in with all this?
oh yeah, it was. And I started after Midnight Apparitions. I was going through a lot of personal. I was going through some hard times, and that How to Be Whole album is very, very lo-fi, very, very 4-track. That's how I wanted it. Um, then then I started then I started assembling albums that I still have yet to record, and I'm working on one now. I started recording an album that actually the album that I put together in the early 2000s is in the can, but I'm just mixing it now. So watch for
Right.
that. It's called Valley View Drive, and I'm really really pleased with it. It's very much a desert where I grew up. There was a lot of car racing going on out in the desert, the land speed trials, and there's a lot of songs that deal with racing in the desert, and it all goes back to that era, the early 2000s. I'm reaching back to my early years. I'm living in Austin, but I'm thinking about the desert of western Utah.
Right.
I finally recorded those songs, and it's going to come out soon. But there's another album I started recording here in Austin at the do you know Ray Benson? He's a Texas swing
No.
musician, leader of a group called Sleep at the Wheel. He's got a nice studio that I started recording at, and I'm trying to finish an album that I wrote in 2013, and I'm going to finally do that. But that's been a peculiar part of my whole musical trajectory as I get sidetracked with other projects that take over
Yes.
my
So
thought
when
process.
did so was it the late kind of years when you wrote your amazing book on sort of
Yeah.
70s radio? How did that sort of come about? Because that's a colossal piece of work, which is it's not really, it's like a studious piece of academic writing, isn't it?
It is. It is. I went to grad school at the University of Texas in American Studies. And the reason I did that is because I had started writing the book. I was going to the library and I started reading Billboard magazines from the 70s, which is just it was basically a nostalgic. That was me finding my way. I was doing I was working on campus, but I would sneak off and I would read Billboard magazine because that was a comforting thing I did. My dad had a recording studio growing up, and I would sneak off and I would read his old stacks of billboards and music trade papers
Yes.
and get lost in those. What I should have been doing, as I mentioned this in the book, what I should have been doing was learning how to be a studio person and have a career as a studio, but instead I was sneaking off and reading the trade papers. And so there I was doing that again in my 20s. I'm sneaking off and reading the trade papers, old habits. But I started realizing as I was trolling, as I was reading through all of the early 70s magazines, that there was a story developing that had not been told. This is what you hope for when you're an academic, is that you
Right.
got the story that's not being told. And I was seeing all of this angst in the early 70s. There was all this talk about radio formats and what are we going to do? What's going to happen? They had conferences, these long conferences where they would report them in full, what everybody was saying about the future of top 40, the future of rock. This was going on from 70 to 1974. And by 1975, it all trailed off.
Right.
Basically, the formatting anxiety had been basically settled. It had solidified into a workable philosophy by 1975. And that was also when the sound of very smooth, yet the yacht rock sound started really kicking into high gear in 75. Soul music started to get much less political and edgy. Rock and roll was starting to sound like AOR as opposed to rock and roll. It was album oriented rock. It all sounded very formatted by the mid 70s. And it was interesting because that all matched up with what I was seeing. There was all this format angst. And you heard that in the music in the early 70s. Like, what the hell is this? School's Out, followed by the Carpenters, followed by
Yes.
Hot Butters Popcorn. Or what is going on with pop music? What even is rock music today? And then by the mid 70s, yes, rock music. It's Journey and Steely Dan, and
Yes. It's very cultivated, isn't
it's
it?
kind of it's like the airplane was bumpily riding up to the level, and then by 75, okay, all right. And so that's where the book came from. I got wise to the story, and I started making notes about. So I had this whole book. I had started writing a book about the songs of 1972, just an arbitrary year, right in the middle of the early 70s. And I wrote commentary on every single song in the top 40. Just a fun little digest reader thing. And I submitted that and got into the grad school and was able to turn that whole line of thinking into a dissertation that I then turned into a more lay reader friendly book.
Yes, God, it's an extraordinary. Was that period of the late or the early 70s, was it just struggling to find its identity after the headiness of the 60s and the way that so much
Yeah,
of that kind of came crashing to an end with the death of, Jim Morrison and Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin. You had the breakup of the Beatles, who'd obviously been on the landscape for 6 years with all those albums and
yeah,
albums and films. And then just that sense of like, oh my God, the 70s is here. And that 60s generation were tired, weren't they? The door, like everything was, it felt like the party was over. We had Altamont, Charles Manson, and
yeah.
then where do you turn next?
Yeah, so the stage was set for James Taylor and the Carpenters.
It
Let's
was
let,
the
let's relax.
Laurel Canyon.
Yeah, let's relax a little bit. Let's look inward. And that was such a theme. There's a good book by David Brown about the year 1970 where he just looks at the music of the Beatles and James Taylor and Simon and Garfunkel, Paul Simon. And it's just all about that inward turn. Uh, and, there's so many other things that were interesting to me that needed to be in the book. So talking about country, I could talk about the redefinition of the rural audience. The country audience was very political and off to the side in terms of pop radio, but in the early 70s it got much more crossover, and as did soul radio.
So
um
did you find then from the book that things became less political, even though the politics of the day with, I mean, Vietnam was still going, there had oil crisis, there was an amazing amount of terrorism. I mean, the IRA were, I think during that period, I think it was 72 or 73, there was something like 400 deaths of
oh, there's
bombings.
still a lot of politics, and there was a lot of the early 70s was still very political. A lot of the country music was, there were songs that were just outright. There was the Ballad of Lieutenant Calley, where they're defending, this was a hit, a big hit, where they're defending that Marine that killed all those civilians in Vietnam, that he shouldn't have been court-martialed. And there's a song called Cadillac. What was it called? The song about, using welfare money for a brand new Cadillac.
Right.
Um, I wish I could remember the name of the song, but it was it's misspelled Cadillac. And there were a bunch of other ones, but then there were songs like Johnny Cash's "What Is Truth," where he's trying to be a mediating voice, between the pro-war. This is the era of Merle Haggard's. I mean, it was 69 or so when he put out. No, maybe it was 1970 when he put out "The Fight Inside of Me,"
Right.
where he was belittling the entire war protest movement. So it was very rocky. Yeah, but then by the mid 70s, country music was very comfortably crossing over. There was a TV show that debuted in 1974 called Pop Goes the Country, and that was essentially a good, I don't know, that was a good reminder to everybody that we were in this new era of crossover.
And obviously radio plays a big part, but was it the housewives that were the people that were particularly important for the marketing members of the record company at this stage?
Yeah. In the early 70s it was, because they were identified as the decision makers in terms of a household's, spending habits. So if records were going to be bought, most of the housewives were going to be the first portal you had to go through. So
Right.
that rise to the very, very robust adult contemporary sound, that was the format. Still referred to as that, adult contemporary, AC. And that was referred to as soft rock, or some radio people referred to it as chicken rock. So any station that played the Carpenters was chickening out on playing hard-edged rock
Right.
by playing stuff that was palatable to older listeners, particularly housewives. So
Yes.
it was almost like this feeling of the housewives bringing a softer, sedated sound to popular music, thanks to radio's decision to market to them. And if you watch a movie like The Stepford Wives, you
I
can
was going to
start.
mention this was such a moment, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we need all the wives to be all of a certain. It became something much more sinister and sci-fi in that movie, but there was kind of a parallel, this idea that through the women things can be stabilized and made all the same across the board.
Yes, but then some people were doing, I mean, people like Elvis, his
Hmm.
early 70s wasn't too bad, but he was starting to struggle to know where to fit in during this period as well, doesn't he? And he sort of meets Nixon and becomes this kind of person who's combating or sort of fighting the war against drugs as well, which is kind of an odd sort of episode as well.
Yeah, yeah. Elvis was trying to find himself, but that wasn't the early 70s was an era where he was actually back on the country charts. He kind of disappeared from the country charts during the 60s because country radio decided that we are not Elvis. He was such a part of country when he rose up in the late 50s, and in the early 60s it was you see it, you see it on the charts. He disappeared. He stopped appearing on country charts because program directors decided that he is not us. A lot of our
Right.
people like Elvis, but he is not us. So he would creep in from time to time, but he was kind of a non Jerry Lee Lewis too. They were not around by the early 70s, late 60s, early 70s. For Jerry Lee Lewis, he kind of roared back to the country charts in the late 60s, but Elvis became more of a regular figure.
Yes. Yes.
Crossover country, AC, top 40.
So as the 70s then progressed, then we have the birth. Is it the birth of yacht rock at this stage? Is this where the bands like America appear, and then Steely Dan, and this kind of new vibe, Doobie Brothers and people like that? Is this kind of reaction against the political 60s and sort of wanting to change society, but rather look inwardly and wanted to have a good time?
I do think it's all a part of that. And the other part of it is just technology. FM radio was much more commonly listened to by the early 70s. It was more of a niche oddball thing in the 60s, but it was a standard choice in car radios by the early 70s. And it sounded better. And so of course the music was going to sound better. And so, you know, the music makers who were arrangers at heart, they were going to up their game, and they did. By the time, already by early 73, we were having Seals and Crofts and Bread, and um Bread were, I think of them as an early version of it. Yacht rock people are very funny now. It's become such a thing that people are drawing lines. There are people who are saying this person is definitely not yacht rock, that person is. And but for me, it's this oncoming relaxing wave. It's Bread, it's definitely Steely Dan, who were not always relaxing, but they were so interesting sonically.
Yes.
They had a jazz sensibility to them that was relaxing. And Loggins and Messina, Kenny Loggins, so much more. It,
Yes.
it was this wave of warm sonic water washed over us by the mid 70s.
And
And
obviously, I suppose in this country, and I suppose in America, the Eagles, Hotel California, and
oh
then
yeah,
Rumors by Fleetwood Mac sort of
room,
seals
yeah,
they
yeah,
are
and yeah, music that makes one think of better economic positions that enable you to ride in your yacht. I was thinking about that one day. I was out on a lake in Canyon Lake south of Boston, and I was thinking about that, and is it really yacht rock, and why is it called that? And then I sat, and then a yacht. There was nobody there, and then a yacht went by, and it was playing Easy Like Sunday Morning as the sun was going down by the Commodores. And I thought, yeah, there really is something to yacht rock. That sounds like the
yes.
perfect yacht rock song.
It's yes, the famous. It's sort of escaping. It sort of paints a picture, doesn't it? It's a very
Yeah.
impressionistic kind of vibe, really. So then, how did with the 70s? Then, how did that sort of deal with punk and that rise of new wave? Was that sort of another one of those culture clashes that you found that was a struggle between two sets of people?
Yeah, definitely. And it hit the UK before it hit the US, by all means. Um, I'm trying to think what was the first overtly punk hit in the US, and I don't know. Punk didn't really hit the US on the radio until much later, till like Green Day.
Right. So really, the Clash didn't sort of
Um,
appeal, or the Buzzcocks.
Yeah, they were always under the radar. And but all those groups we heard on the alternative stations that I listened to as a teenager, punk was never fully accepted thing until the 90s. But yeah, there was always the American audience always viewed disco as the big threat to rock and roll, and punk was just always a side story. I mean, that's the way
Right.
I experienced it, and of course, it had a racial edge, but disco never went away.
No, no, it's
It was stronger than ever. That's the funny thing,
yes.
and it
That's
stayed very much alive. In the New Romantics kept it alive in a lot of ways.
yeah. And people started to, I suppose, yeah, just go back and realize actually some of those records were amazing. I just felt very uncomfortable trying to dance, actually. That was my problem, was that I quite liked the music, but the idea of going to a nightclub and dancing was quite intimidating. So that was my problem in life, which I,
So you were old enough to go to the clubs. When disco was big, when I was a kid, it was a roller skating
oh, yes.
thing. Roller skating was what kids my age did, and you danced with other, you would go dancing and pick the girl you wanted to skate with, and all of those songs translated to me that way.
Yes, I would imagine it would have
You
been
didn't have to
very,
dance. That was the beauty of that. You didn't have to even dance. You could just skate at whatever level you were at, around and around, possibly holding hands, as Gary Newman's Cars played in 1980.
God, that's a lovely form of courtship, really, isn't it? It's like in
Yeah, it
the
really is. I
before
don't think
they,
it's still around. I think it went away after my era. I think it was around until 83 or 84, but the glory days of the skating rink,
yes,
or late
that's
70s, early 80s thing.
and would you agree then that MTV killed a lot of the yacht rock bands?
Yeah, it did, because they didn't yacht rock was all about the sound and not about the visuals. So yacht rockers had to work extra hard to look presentable. There's a lot said. There's a good documentary that just came out. I forget what it's called. I don't know if it's available in the UK, but it's a yacht rock documentary.
I
Anyway,
love
they talk to a lot of people, and it follows up on a lot of the stuff that gets talked about in that BBC one.
yes, I was
But
just
they
it's
interview like
nice.
Steve Lukather and a lot of those Toto guys, um, and then at the end of it, they try to get in touch with Don Fagen, and he tells them to go piss off. They get on the phone, and he's very surly, and he clearly hates being associated with yacht rock in any
That's
form of
quite
that.
nice. I like the fact that Toto had such
A
an
lot of
influence.
talk. Well, there's a lot of talk in that documentary about the unease they felt with being suddenly needing to be camera ready, as well as studio microphone ready.
Right. That
And
must
that
have been
yeah, and MTV kind of put the kibosh on that.
they did. They were Simon Le Bon was on another planet, really, wasn't he? He had the business. So then going back to your own, so that book came out. How long did it take to write? Because it is quite colossal.
I started writing it in 2005, and the book came out in 2011.
Blimey, you must have been shattered when that came out.
It was it was a big project.
It was a big
Uh,
project. And then when that came out, you then sort of got back into recording again.
yeah, yeah. I started messing around with a friend who had a label, wanted to record some stuff, and so I played around with that, and then I kept working an administration job and just playing local gigs. And what the fun thing about the book is, I get to weigh in on things periodically, like that documentary I heard from Graham Lovat, who just said, "Hey, I saw your book, and we're doing this documentary. Can what do you think about?" And so I've been able to weigh in on things. I'll get contacted. Um, Somebody from the Country Music Hall of Fame wanted me to weigh in on a recent Bob Dylan thing they're doing, because it was about his self-portrait years, and
Right.
they wanted me to. So it's fun. It's been an ongoing dialogue, and people have continued to write more about radio and formatting. And what I wanted the book to be was something useful. I wanted to tell that story so it could be built upon in a way that had the support of the trade papers that I knew quite intimately. I knew what was being said in the trade. I knew what the business thought during those.
Yes.
So I wanted that to be all collected, and my views on the cultural things I read into it. I wanted that all to be there, and I did it.
God, it's a colossal piece of work. So then the first album you recorded, once that came out, was Yours All the Way. Was that the first one of your sort of
That's another,
releases?
yeah, and that's another album of songs that were from a lot of different eras, but I strung together into a narrative of sorts. And they all seem to have a similar vibe. And then I had a lot of instrumental guitar pieces, so I put out an instrumental guitar album. And I'm not good with, like a lot of musicians, I'm not very enthusiastic or skilled about what to do with the project when it's done.
Right.
Um, but I made a deal with myself around that time that, all right, it's cool if you suck at that, just keep it coming. And so that's what I've told myself. Just keep it coming, and even if it's comes off as eccentric or a strange follow-up to what you started with on the previous project, just do it anyway. Keep it coming. And at least you're doing that. And that's what I keep telling myself. And then if someday, if someone steps forward and says, I can help you with scheduling, I can help you with formulating a marketing idea, that's all great. But in the meantime, being who I am, I can at least keep recording and keep making things available.
My God, that's amazing. So after that, you had the Comets Swish Their Tails, which was then
I
you had
recorded,
the
I recorded a lot of those albums just at home. So
yeah,
if I listen back to them, and I can the problem with doing that is if you're the only person who did it all, you can second guess yourself every time you listen to it. That's the blessing of doing that, is you can always wince and second guess yourself, and forget that you finished it.
yeah.
Tempted to
It's
go back.
quite so
That's
there's
and that's the thing about keeping it coming is it keeps you from messing with the stuff that you did.
yeah. So there's been archiving because you did the album Before I Melt Away, songs from the early 80s as well. Were
Yeah.
they re-recorded or were they what you had recorded and on tape?
I recorded all of those freshly, except for two. Um, the song called "Sound of the Rain" I had recorded back in 2006, and I just included that with the collection. And I had also recorded a version of "Wishful Thinking" by China Crisis. I had done a solo acoustic guitar version of it that I thought sounded that I liked, and so I included that.
And then
Actually, no, that was recorded with all the "Sound of the Rain" is the only one that was from another era. All the rest were freshly recorded, all of them. That whole year, I just recorded the entire thing. It just came upon me for whatever reason.
you thought,
Yeah,
yes,
I had an itch I had to scratch, and
it's good.
better or worse. And I was happy with, but
So,
if I would,
and so the last album you recorded, which was out in 2025, these were ones that you'd found from your dad's archives.
right, yeah, all these songs. The very first song on it, called "Mr. Berg Sent Me," is a demo he did with his. He had a show band, and they had written some songs. He had written some songs that they recorded, and typically he just put it aside because he had to get working on something else. And
Right.
I thought it was such a fun. It sounded so 78 to me, the nature of the song. And I knew the story about it. Somebody had come in saying, Mr. Berg sent me. Someone came in from Detroit or something, like, Mr. Berg sent me, and I don't know if you know him, but he said you'd take care of me. And so
Funny.
they couldn't really help him adequately, but he got a song out of it. And some of the other songs have a religious feeling because he wrote them for the church there in Salt Lake City.
Right.
Um, some of the songs were written for a country client, so there's some songs that have a country edge, and
Did you enjoy covering someone else's material? Was that quite a relief that you thought, well, I don't have to worry about,
yeah,
I can just channel the spirit and make it
yeah.
happen?
But I still feel my problem is I still feel a little bit of I want some kind of verification from my dad that it's cool what I did with his songs. And so I think I need to just get over that and say, look, here it is. And
Yes.
when I listen to it, I feel, I feel what I wanted to feel, which was a communication with my dad. And I wanted to feel like I wanted to feel like I was paying tribute to his songs. And I would like to think that he would. And, which of those songs he put his heart into everything, but which of those songs were really, really part of his heart? I don't know. I don't know. So I just decided to include all the ones that I remembered most clearly, having heard him working on. And
Yeah. That must have been quite an emotional experience, actually.
yeah, it really was. And that was another whole year. I had to put a lot of stuff, other stuff I wanted to record aside so I could get this out of my system. And it's one of those things that when you're done with it, you're just done with it. And
Well, yes, it's a hard one to emotionally navigate, really. So then this year and going into next ish, what have you got lined up, did you say, that's kind of on the radar?
so yeah, the next thing coming up is a new album called Valley View Drive. So it's the one I was telling you about that kind of has a western Utah, eastern Nevada desert vibe.
Yes.
And there are a bunch of songs that I've had in the can since early 2000s. Tweaked some of them, but I've recorded them all freshly here. And the way it's feeling, it's my favorite one so far. And that's how you're supposed to feel when you're doing a new album. It's my favorite one yet.
No, it's good. I mean,
It'll be
so
the
you got
first
your
one
recording studio at the house.
just at my house. I did it all at home again,
Oh,
but
that must
I'm
be
feeling okay.
fantastic.
The next album, I've decided to go into this studio called Bismo Studios in Austin. I think I'm just going to chip away at the next album, and then I've got two more that I'm ready to do. And what I really want to do when I'm done with all this, I don't know if I'll be done with it, but I know all of these international songs from doing my radio show for so many years.
Yes.
I'll start recording a lot of those and like put out little series of albums, International Folk Bazaar albums, songs from Yugoslavia or songs from Scandinavia, or I don't know, songs that I learned from Cowboy Donley, songs. It'd be fun to have a little series of international
Oh,
folk.
absolutely. That would be a lovely project, actually. There's nothing like a project, is there?
Yeah, nothing. It's great. It's good to have stuff lined up. It keeps you waking up in the morning, I guess,
Well,
right?
quite. So just going back to, so most of this is actually on Spotify, is it? Do you have a Bandcamp page at all, or do you,
I do. I do. If you look me up on Bandcamp,
you're
uh,
there?
I'm there.
Is
I
that
think
with the J, by the way?
it's without the J because I set that up a long time ago. And
Yes.
the J is kind of the new me. The next album will be billed to Kim J Simpson, and I need to stick with it.
And the radio shows, they're under your tab, radio show, which is the Wednesday one. So do you have them all archived, or is it just the last one?
I have a lot of them archived, and but a lot of them are not available. I've been adding them slowly but surely. This is typical with me as I get going, and then I sort of get in the weeds. But Mixcloud, if you go to International Folk Bazaar on Mixcloud, there are shows archived from years gone by. And my plan is I've got all of them. I mean, I download all of them after the show's done,
Yeah.
and my plan is to just upload them. My interview with on the Mixcloud, you can hear my interview with Joe Boyd.
Excellent. I'll have to listen to that. Yeah,
That, That's on there. And some other interesting shows. I did a show of international roots bands playing 80 songs. So you can hear a Brazilian band playing like When Doves Cry or whatever. Um, and there's just a lot of most of the International Folk Bazaar shows are themeless. So I go all over the world and I just kind of follow my mood. Sometimes
Fantastic.
I'll have a subject theme. Tomorrow I've got to do a show tomorrow, and I have a bunch of songs about the moon. It's a full moon, so I thought, hey, I've never done a show about moon songs. And what's the word for moon in Czech? It's miesiec. What is it in Croatian? Miesec. What is it in French? Lune. So I can look for all these songs that I have, and what is it in German? Du, it's like a du mold, I think, or du monde, or something like that.
Right. So that's fantastic.
Mold in Hungarian.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
I'll definitely tune in. Yes, I think it's called the Bear Moon tomorrow, isn't it? Something.
yeah, or the buck moon, or the
Yeah,
thunder
they love to have a name for each moon, don't they?
moon. They have
So
a moon, and I always get them mixed up. I could play Pink Moon, but I think that's too obvious.
yeah,
The
or
format
the
of,
Water Boys as well.
yeah, the whole of the moon. I've heard a nice acoustic version of that. That would be a good one, actually.
Yeah, I know
So that
Terry Reid did a version of that, which was all right,
oh,
but
Harry Reid was great, wasn't he?
he was fantastic. You
What a
know,
song. What a
Seed of a Memory is just the best album he did, which is
oh, I need to listen to that again.
it's
The one I'm most familiar with is the one where he does "Speak Now or Forever Hold Your Peace," which Cheap Trick covered on their first album. And he also does a version of Donovan's Super Lungs. I think that album
oh
is
yes,
Harry Reid, but then he put out a really moody one called River.
yeah, with Dean on the first. Oh, that was such a great song.
Great records, Terry Reid.
If you ever get a chance, there's a clip of Terry Reid at one of the very first Glastonburys in the early 70s, and he's playing. Interesting enough, he's got Alan White, who was the drummer for Yes and various other bands. And they're all there, you know, in a very 70s way. They're all rolling a joint, they're all passing this joint around, and including Alan White. And then Terry's singing, and he's just absolutely brilliant. And then Linda Lewis comes on and starts kind of singing with him, and it's you know, it is all very early stoner rock, but it's just, you know, but they haven't wrecked themselves, if you know what I mean. They're still with it enough to make a great sound. And
I'm gonna look for that.
but
I
yeah,
love
if
it.
you but yes, the yeah, that track is on that sort of, I think it's 71. I think it's the same year that Melanie was there doing her Beautiful People and all those songs. And
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
yeah, it's great. But look, thank you ever so much for this. It's been amazing. And if you want, I can, well, I'll put it up, and I can
Please
send you a
do.
clip if you want to put it on your website at all.
Yeah, I'd like to do that. I would love to be able to tell people about it.
Yes, well, absolutely. Well, it's been fascinating. And yes,
Well, I
I
can't
still go
believe
back to your book, which is just a masterpiece.
Well, thank you so much. It just means a lot, and what a pleasure to do this. And it's I'm so glad that it's of interest to you.
Yeah, and actually, I've really enjoyed listening to your solo albums. Actually, it's been really enjoyable. So fascinating that, because it's often, you know, like you see someone's work and it's the very early years, and then they haven't done anything. But you're
Yeah.
actually more prolific with age, actually, which is a very good. So look, before we go, I'll just tell you my favorite Richard Thompson song, and then you go, oh yeah, I like that one. I love Bees Wing.
Swing, wonderful album or wonderful song.
The
Um,
lyrics to that are just too much.
I think that's what he used as the title of his memoir, which is a really good memoir. He only
Right,
up to he only writes up to the end of the 60s. So it's kind of his how I got going.
right. Because I
And,
think he lived in a community in Suffolk, which is just down the road from us. So
is that right?
there was a period of that actually. And the other one is Waltzing for Dreamers and I Misunderstood, which I think is amazing.
Oh, I love all those. Yeah, I've seen him a number of times, and yeah, I love those songs. I'm a big fan of his. What town
Yes.
are you, David?
Norwich in the UK,
Okay.
which is a quaint town or city, isn't it? So yeah, it's in there. So everyone loves it. So there you have it. There you go. But look, I'll let you go. But thank you again, and I'll keep in touch. But all the best for your next projects. Look forward to
Well,
them.
I'll keep you posted, and thanks a million once again.
Yeah, take care. See you later. Bye.
Okay, bye bye.
Bye-bye. And that was me in conversation with J Simpson, talking about his life in music and also his amazing book that came out a few years ago. This has been the C86 show, David Eastaugh. Have a great week. Stay safe.